seizures and of memory loss. Several hundred special operators are now deployed in the Middle East, and I'm very concerned about whether or not our troops are getting the care that they need for these injuries. For instance, we know about a soldier who was injured in the Iranian drone strike in Kuwait, and he was promised TBI care once they made it out of the war zone. But even after being shipped to Germany and then to Texas, the soldier didn't receive care for weeks. So, Admiral Bradley, do you think that wounded soldiers should have to wait nearly a month to see a doctor?
Senator, no. In the hypothetical, I absolutely don't believe that. I don't know the details of the situation, though.
Yeah, but that's the real point. We can agree they need help and they need to be evaluated right away. And this committee has worked on a bipartisan basis to help service members with brain injuries. But without records of these injuries, it becomes harder and harder to get care. That's particularly critical for high speedboat teams and special operators, given the exposure to these pounding waves and high caliber weapons. Boat team leaders have described how, quote, the damage piles up almost unnoticed for years and then cascades. But DoD requires cognitive assessments only every 5 years and SOCOM every 3. I have a bipartisan bill with Senators Ernst and King and others on this committee to make sure that these injuries don't fall through the cracks, including by requiring more regular screening and logs to be able to track exposure. Admiral Bradley, the effects of TBIs can compound over time, as we know. Do you agree that it is better if we catch these brain injuries earlier rather than later?
Senator, I absolutely do.
Good. And do you support keeping better records so that we're able to do that and more frequent evaluations?
Senator, I do. It is critical to be able to understand the mechanisms of harm that come from these various sources that we don't understand very well. Yeah. And that data, those logs, that data will help to inform not only treatment, but also means to be able to prevent it in its outset.
Good. I appreciate that. You know, the fact that troops have faced long wait lists to get specialty care for brain health within DoD's military system. And one of the ways that DoD has tried to address these wait lists is by partnering with outside experts like Home Base back in Massachusetts. Home Base's comprehensive brain health and trauma program has helped get 95% of special operators that it's treated back into the field. Admiral Bradley, in your experience, have special operators benefited from programs like Home Base?
Senator, absolutely. Combat, that comprehensive program for brain health, is a critical part. We also have partnerships with UNC, University of North Carolina, and Southern Florida, and several others to be able to do the same thing. They are all very capable and progressing programs. I think, as you highlight, institutionalizing those beyond the pilot that they are into something that is a part of our mainstream system that can then be treated with TRICARE and with our VA systems is a critical next step.
And I very much appreciate your point about institutionalizing it. We can't just treat this as a one-off. We know the problem exists. We've got to record, we've got to document, and we've got to have people who can treat it. We need to have dedicated resources to support our troops who are suffering from brain injuries. The Trump administration has plunged us into a war and is asking Congress for a record $1.5 trillion for the Pentagon. It is outrageous that we would be cutting corners on treating wounded warriors. Thank you, Admiral. I look forward to working with you on this. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Senator Rosen.
Well, thank you, Chairman Wicker, Ranking Member Reed, and thank you for, well, saw you a little bit earlier today, so thank you again for your service and for being here. I want to talk a little bit about operational tempo and readiness reporting, because cyber operation forces, well, of course, they're always in high demand, but they've been in extra high demand since Cybercom was established, which has been exacerbated by the challenges of getting the unit readiness numbers up at the same time. Now that we're fighting wars in multiple theaters, I have to imagine that the operational tempo of those forces is also increasing dramatically. So General Rudd, could you give us a sense of what the trend is for the op tempo of Cyber National Mission Force, please?
Thanks, Senator Rosen. I appreciate the attention on this topic. As you described, and as we would expect, very high demand and a very high operational tempo for our cyber warriors in support, in real time, 24/7 of the Joint Force across a number of problem sets. And so this really speaks to the heart of one of the attributes of Cybercom 2.0 that we refer to as optimized unit phasing. So think of a cycle upon which you rotate. Again, this is where we have a lot to gain from understanding SOCOM's model for years. Both Admiral Bradley and I were part of a system that had a rotational force effort. Now, granted, there's surges, and we account for those, but part of the way we accounted for that is size of the force and bringing in sufficient capacity to be able to operationally employ the force continuously across a number of problem sets.
Well, that's good because you didn't know what my next question would be, but it's to Secretary Sutton, the status of implementing the 97 recommendations from Cybercom 2.0. What is that? And the resources, speaking of to your point, General, the resources needed to implement them, especially when setting up 3 enabling organizations.
Senator, thank you for that question and for your continued focus on the cyber topic over the years. From an implementation perspective, as you mentioned, there's a lot of tasks. So the approach that we're taking is that within my office, I've built a core team that is dedicated to the implementation process. And one of the things that's really exciting to me about that is it features contributions from all of our service cyber components. And we've actually brought in people who have been in our force for a long time that are now have the opportunity to build the system, the talent management system that they wish they would have had. So it's the unicorns that we're trying to build at scope and scale are now coming in and helping to write the details, build out the assessments we need, and come up with the models of how we keep careers going to build mastery. From a resource perspective, we have included funding for the Cyber Command 2.0 initiatives in the President's 27 budget, including funding to start incentive pay to get mastery incentives implemented, as well as for some of the enabling organizations and some of the other service requirements to be able to get this to speed, and look forward to being able to execute that upon passage of the budget for FY27.
Thank you. I'm going to stick on cyber operations for a minute because I want to talk about intelligence capabilities. So, General